Don't buy off-plan investment properties. This is a bit of a provocative title, but overall, that's what I'm thinking now. My name is Fabrizio Cravero, and this channel is all about property investment for the UK and overseas investors. If you are new to the channel, please subscribe, but only if you enjoy the content. I'm here to provide a service to you. There are many reasons why off-plan properties are not the best investment on mine and in many other investors' opinion. And I will share those reasons with you through my own personal experience with an off-plan flat that I bought several years ago in London, before I get educated in property investment. I received to my inbox a leaflet advertising a property exhibition here in Hong Kong where I live. A big UK developer set up the meeting room of the Mandarin Hotel in the central business district of Hong Kong. Beautifully, really great environment where pastry, tea, coffee were offered to the attendants. When I arrived, a salesperson with a branded suit welcomed me and started to explain to me the great location of the new development, the luxurious concierge, the stylish gym, the library, and also pointed out that the area where the building was located had the potential to see a massive increase in prices in the near future. I used to spend a lot of time in London for my other job, and I knew actually the area quite well. I knew that a well-known new shopping mall was planned to be built there, and that meant that there was a lot of potential for a capital appreciation. Long story short, in the shiny brochure being given, the expected rental achieved was clearly stated, as well as the expected yield. And I still remember it as it was now. The two-bedroom flat had an expected yield of 5.02%. I was so excited with the idea of getting 5% return for a few years, and then the plan was to sell the flat and to collect close to £50,000 gain for the capital appreciation alone. So eventually I committed, everything has been arranged for me. I paid the deposit and I signed the document and I officially committed to buy an off-plan apartment in London. Eventually, 3 years later, the development was completed and I officially owned a flat in London. And that's where things started to get less positive. On completion, I had to pay for the stamp duty, then the solicitor's fee. The letting agent said that the furniture pack will have made the letting easier. Of course, I had no choice but to pay for those expenses, even though that was something that I didn't plan a few years before when I committed. Next, the letting agent suggested a monthly rent 10% less than what the developer expected 3 years before. That was terrible for me. How can the developer make such a wrong prediction? Was he on purpose to sell the flat maybe? Once again, no choice. If I wanted my flat to be rented when hundreds of flats were released all together in the market, I have to have the correct rental price. Otherwise my unit will have not been rented out. And finally, when the tenant moved in and the letting agent collected the first month of rent, my statement was still negative. What? Negative. Of course, the letting agent doesn't work for free, right? To find a tenant costs money. To check in the tenant costs money. To collect the rent costs money. And I had to pay for all of it. Also, afterwards, in the following months, 12% plus VAT went directly to the letting agent. And plus, I started to pay for the ground rent. What the ground rent is? Practically, the flat is a leasehold, 999 years lease. And I thought that that was not a problem. Most probably I won't live for 999 years, right? But that means that I have to pay the developer and he can change the amount to be paid without consulting the flat owners. And then I paid for the service charges. Do you remember when I shared with you that the building had a great gym, the elegant concierge, and even a library? Exactly. There are many expenses to manage all the amenities, and the landlord has to pay for the service charges. And by the way, I don't get to choose the management company. So once again, I'm at the mercy of the freeholder. Do you want to know how much the nice 5% return expected by the developer actually become? In reality, my real net return dropped down to 2.54%. Wow, 2.54% is 50% less than what the developer expected, or at least what I've been told it was supposed to be. So, this is my experience with an off-plan flat. But I won't dare to tell you not to buy off-plan flat just because things didn't go well for me. Now that I get educated in property and I gain experience while building £1 million portfolio in the UK, I did my researches and I noticed that actually there is something in common among all the off-plan flats advertised. First, the developers always expect a certain rent achieved on completion. Of course, the flat doesn't exist yet, so the rent can only be expected. But maybe it's a coincidence. The projections are always very, very bright. I usually say that the shinier the brochure is, the worse the deal. So, do your own due diligence and make sure you check yourself what it is the real rent that can be achieved. And second, the developer or the salesperson always only share the expected yield. But let me remind you how to calculate the yield. The yield is the yearly income divided by the money invested times 100. Look at it, look at this formula. The yearly income is the rent collected. And when we are talking about off-plan flat, the rent is expected and inflated by the developer. And none of the related costs are taken into consideration. I told you, the ground rent needs to be paid, the service charges, then the management company has a cost as well. All that makes this number here being much lower in reality, and that affects the final results. And look at the money invested. In the brochure, the yield calculation never takes into account the legal fee to buy the flat, the stamp duty, the furniture pack. There are many extra costs involved to buy a property. That makes this number here much higher in reality, affecting the yield once again. So, now you understand that the projected yield is just a figure that needs to look attractive to sell the flat. Once again, my suggestion here is to do your own due diligence and don't just blindly believe what it is written in the shiny brochure. So, the shinier the brochure is, the worse the deal. To help you with the calculation of the real net return you can achieve from your properties, I'm happy to share with you my own deal analyzer. That's the spreadsheet that I always use before even placing an offer on the property I'm interested in. And you can have it for free simply by clicking the link in the description below. The next point to consider is that usually off-plan flats are part of a big development with hundreds of units. And when the building is completed, the market is flooded with so many flats to rent. So the question is there enough rental demand in the area? Guess what my suggestion is? Due diligence. It is up to you to check the demand. I showed you before in other videos how this can easily be done from your computer or simply by making a few phone calls. And then another very important point is that off-plan flats are flat, right? Of course, stupid statement. But what that means is the flat usually are leasehold. And when you buy a leasehold property, you don't own the land it sits on, which means you are at the mercy of the freeholder. You don't have the full control. So, educate yourself, understand the pros and cons of a leasehold flat, and then make your informed decisions. Next, as I said, the off-plan flats are always advertised through a shiny brochure, elegant website, luxurious exhibitions. Nothing wrong with it, but maybe the intention is to distract the investor from what really matters. Plus, the advertising cost will be passed to you, the investor. As you can see, those are just some of the reasons for my statement at the beginning of the video. Don't buy off-plan investment properties. Or should I say, buy off-plan flats if that's the type of investment that suits you. But make sure you know what you're investing in. Do your own due diligence, and remember, the shinier the brochure is, the worse the deal. And now that you know more about property investment, please subscribe to the channel, like and comment on this video, and remember, invest with knowledge, create financial freedom. I'll see you in the next video.